Okay, folks, in this lecture, we're going to look at social standing, okay? Now, one of the first videos that I asked you to watch, I looked at race and ethnicity, race being more about biology, skin, physical characteristics, and ethnicity being more about shared experiences, shared cultural heritage. And this could be things like food, religion, language, geography, place of origin, those kinds of things. But what does that race ethnic experience look like as it relates to social standing in the United States? Now, there is a history there, okay? And that's what I'm going to walk you through. And we're going to be looking at material that starts on page 353, okay? And what you're going to see here in that material is we're going to be looking at, and remember this chapter is race and ethnic inequality. We're going to be looking at income, poverty, and education. We're going to focus on those things. And you remember, back in the chapter on social class, we looked at the same variables: income, poverty, education, occupation, family background. Okay. And we did the same in the chapter on gender. So we're looking at the same variables across categories, okay? So let's do that. And here's the first slide. So, social standing of Native Americans, okay? Now, in each of these tables, you're going to see the entire U.S. population on the right-hand side, and then the racial category that we're looking at. Now, I'm sorry that these aren't better digital files, but I don't have digital files for these tables, so I had to take a picture of them out of the book and then put them in a PowerPoint this way. So, average income, percent in poverty, completion of 4 or more years of college. Now, again, remember, this is looking at those that are 25 years of age and up, 4 or more years of college, okay? So that's a large swath of the adult population. You can see this is much lower than this. And this is much higher than this. This is almost half of what this is. So what is it about being Native American and having lower average income, having higher rates of poverty, and having lower levels of education? Now, what I would encourage you to consider is looking at Native American history as it relates to being in North America. And what has the relationship been with Native Americans and the dominant white majority? That's not been a very good history. Native American culture, historically, traditionally, doesn't have the same type of belief system, value system as what we see in mainstream United States. So the history and the culture of being Native American has a lot to do with this. They're not well assimilated or culturated into the U.S. population. Okay? So looking at social standing. Now we're going to look at African Americans in 2015. Now, educational attainment is higher than Native Americans. Percentage of poverty is a little bit lower, but this is also lower. What is it about being African American in the United States that's a common social standing experience compared to Native Americans? Well, think of the history of Africans in North America. Okay. The question about racial inequality that we've not asked is, does race inequality still exist? And when we look at the data, it's crystal clear that it does. Okay? Now, there's lots of dimensions of inequality and stratification as we've been covering for the last couple of chapters. One of those dimensions has got to do with how we treat one another, okay? But also how race is constructed in terms of official definitions, but also as we think about institutional prejudice and institutional discrimination. how do we perceive people that are different than us? Do we perceive them as being equal in terms of educational attainment, in terms of jobs, in terms of power? Okay? These are very much, social dynamics in society. This is going to give us a chance to look a little bit more at dimensions of immigration, okay? Now then, social standing of Arab Americans, of course, much closer to the U.S. average. Poverty is still pretty high, okay? Look at this. Almost half of those 25 and older have 4 or more years of college. You can see it's higher than the U.S. average. What is it about being Arab American? Now be careful here. You could take the next step and say, what is it about being Arab? Well, first off, where is this from? Okay, where is the Arab world? The Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq. Okay, now be careful, right? Who are Arab Americans in the United States? So are we to think that being Arab means being educated? Being well educated, but not making the U.S. average? Okay, what does it mean to be Arab? And that's going to help us to think also about this next slide when we look at Hispanics. Okay, what does it mean to be Hispanic in the United States? Now, not all Hispanics are Mexican. What is our experience of being Hispanic in Owensboro-Davis County? It might be Mexican. What percentage of those that are Hispanic in Owensboro-Davis County are Mexican? It's pretty high. I mentioned earlier that my wife is half Bolivian. There's only a handful of Bolivians in Owensboro-Davis County that are Hispanic. So what does it mean to be Hispanic in Chicago, in other places? So something that I'd like for you to think about is that race and ethnicity there's a narrative of race and ethnicity. The story that's being told about being black or white or Hispanic or Asian or other, that story can vary from person to person. That story does vary from group to group, okay? The social history. And this is a really good example of this about immigration, okay? Look at the difference here between Mexicans and Cubans. Look at the educational rate. Look at the rate of poverty, much lower than Mexicans, and income is higher, okay? What do we know about Cubans in the United States? Where do they live? Largely in Miami. The Cubans that migrated here from Cuba were fleeing Castro's regime in communist Cuba. And the people that fled were well educated. They had high incomes. They were professionals. A lot of these people were doctors and attorneys. What do we know about people that are doctors and attorneys? They're educated. What do we know about how much money that they make? They make more money. But that is not the Cuban experience. What do we know about people that live in Cuba? They have high levels of education. Don't have a lot of money, though. Okay? There's a lot of poverty. So keep in mind that race is a cultural construct, too. What does it mean to be Mexican in the United States versus being Mexican in Mexico? Okay? Let's elaborate this a little bit further. So we look at Asian Americans. This might surprise you. Look at the all category, all Asian Americans in the United States. Look at that average income. That's higher than the entire U.S. population. Percent poverty is lower. Look at this number. That's almost double what it is here. And look at people from India. This number is much higher than the U.S. population. Poverty is much lower. And almost 3 out of every 4 Asian Indians in the United States, 25 and older, have 4 or more years of college. Okay. Is this a reflection of India? No. As you're going to see when we get to the chapter on global stratification, India is one of the poorest nations in the world. It's a middle income society. Well, who are people that are Indian in the United States? Now, here's a fundamental question of migration. How do you get here from India? You don't walk across a border. You have to fly, usually, to get here. And we know that people that we receive from other countries in airports are largely screened. You have to have resources. You have to have a passport. You have to have a visa to get from India into the United States. Well, how do people from Mexico get into the United States historically? You see what's going on here. You got to be careful about making judgments of race in this country, because how people get here and their social background, their cultural heritage, might not be the same as the people where they live. So this is an interesting look, I think you would agree, about race in the United States. We are the most diverse country on the planet, yet the cultural background might vary from individual to individual. And it also might not be a reflection of where they actually come from. Again, India is a really poor place. Mexico is a really poor place. A lot of the people that come here from Mexico are poor. Okay? Because the access historically has been pretty easy to get here. What country has the highest rate of migration to the United States in 2020? It's not Mexico. I should be a little bit more careful. I don't know the exact country, but I do know that it's Asia. That's the largest increase of migrants to the United States now comes from Asia. And we're talking about China and Japan largely, right? So why are we building a wall on the southwestern border? Okay, that's a political maneuver, right? There's politics involved in that. Immigration, historically in this country, has also been a political thing. Who we receive, who we welcome, who have we forced to come here. So that gets us into thinking about different types of migration. In-migration, out-migration, and forced migration. People we forced to come here, people that we welcome here. The policies of immigration, that's a whole area of study that's beyond what we're going to talk about in an introduction to sociology. Immigration policy has changed drastically over the history of this country. So anymore, when you look at the book that the Statue of Liberty holds, it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free." So that was a policy of immigration in the early years of our country that was open to people coming over. We wanted to fill the country. Of course, the Statue of Liberty now represents a perspective of immigration that is from a long time ago. How do we see migrants now in this country, coming to this country? Okay, so there you go. That's all we're going to cover for this chapter. And stay on top of everything. Let me know if you have any questions. Of course, again, wash your hands, practice safe social distancing, stay at home where all possible, don't travel, and see you next time. Peace.